Okay, Bob.
You ready?
I'm ready. Good morning. This is Bob Mudget. He's going to tell us some stories about his war room here. And he'd like to start with this picture hanging on the wall here. What is that plane, Bob?
That's a B-24.
Okay. What do you want to say about it?
Well, when the Americans started building up with the 8th Air Force, the English were bombing single planes at night, and then we said we would start bombing in the daylight, and the English said you can never do it. Your losses will be too great. But we did it anyway. Now, when we would take off real early in the morning, you wouldn't even see the end of the runways because it was always fogged in England. The only markings we had was that tail marking there. And there would be 3 groups. They were in fields about 10 miles apart. The groups would all be taken off together, and we keep climbing and climbing. We bust above the clouds at about 15,000 feet. And then the groups were formed into a group. Well, it was mass chaos. They could not see that tail marking far enough. So then they took planes and painted them up like this. We call that the mother plane. The mother plane would take off first, and each group had a different colored mother plane. That plane would take off first, and then the group would form on their own mother plane, and that worked very well. Then that plane never went on a mission. It would always go back to the base. What we were attempting to do, a group would be 30 to 36 planes. First, we'd form in a group, and 3 groups would make a wing. Then we'd form into a wing, and then we'd go to the target. So once we get to wing form, so there was a lot of maneuvering and forming before we're ready to go to the target. Then we'd go to the target, and the first mission was my first mission was the first daylight raid on Berlin. And that week, the losses were real heavy because the P-51s couldn't escort us clear into the target. And then they put wing tanks on the P-51s, and they could escort us clear to the target. That made a big difference. And then, so that's the way we now that really intense warfare was the Luftwaffe had pulled everything back to Germany. They didn't even come up until you penetrate German soil, and then they come up like a bunch of bees. But once them P-51s got into action, that really intense warfare only lasted about 60 days. They cleaned the Luftwaffe right out.
Uh-huh.
Now, that's the way we formed the groups. And then after my missions was all over with, I flew, I had a few missions to fly after D-Day. I remember flying, and I flew, D-Day was June 5th. I flew on June 8th, and that's when we were pinned down on Omaha Beach and couldn't start unloading. From the air, looking down into the English Channel, it looked like it was just, I couldn't understand how so many ships could be down there and not be in trouble. And then we bombed St. Lo, just ahead of the. And then after they broke out of Omaha Beach, and then my mission was over, and we were in the depot waiting to be. Thought we were headed for the States. Well, Patton was just liberating Paris at that time, and he'd run into a fuel problem. So they took 30 B-24s out of combat, built wooden racks in the bomb bays, and took just skeleton crews, pilot, co-pilot, engineer, and radio operator, 4-man crew, and sent us to air base right close to London that was close to a refinery. Loaded cans in the bomb bays. That young lad right over there, bent over with a can. That's me right there when I was 19 years old. And we flew gas to Patton. But we were a bunch of teed-off kids there. We were, but looking back at it, it was some of the best times I ever had. At least we weren't being shot at.
Right. So how many trips with fuel did you make?
There was about 300,000 gallons, something like that, and we flew for about 15 days, right around the clock. Of course, in the military, they never tell you the truth. They told us once we moved that fuel, we were as good as in the States. Well, we did such a good job that after that fuel, they sent us to or tried to send us to another refinery that had about twice as much fuel. Well, we just rebelled. Then planes took off and started, they wouldn't even come back, and it was just, and then they finally got us all gathered up with kids. We just thought we had done our share, and then the words was out that they were going to court-martial us. They was going to do everything. And then the air marshal heard about it, and he had a meeting we appointed 4 out of the group to meet with her. Once the air marshal heard what they had told us, what we had done, he went to that base commander and said, I'll give you 7 days to have these kids back in the States, and nothing will be on their records. And then they dropped the bomb soon after that on Germany surrendered, and the war was over. Now, right here, there's a list of the missions I flew right there. You can see the missions I flew. I was awarded 4 air medals, and then the Distinguished Flying Cross. The Distinguished Flying Cross is about the highest award you can get for flying.
Very nice.
And then over here, my plane was named Downwind Leg. Now you wonder why it was named that. That's right there. Right there, Downwind Leg. When we get back to base, we had a pattern we would fly to land. One leg of the pattern was Downwind Leg. So that meant we were home. Now most of these planes were shot down. 50 missions would be a long time for a plane. But everybody liked to fly Lady Luck. Lady Luck made 100 missions and was never shot down.
Well, that's amazing.
And then, now, that dollar bill right there, that is, see, the dollar you have in your pocket has a blue seal on it. That dollar has a gold seal. They call that invasion money. They would mark the money that way, and you pay in different countries. That way they could track the money and know where it was at and so forth. That is a real survivor there, because that's a dollar that didn't buy a beer in Paris. One time we had a plane shot up so bad we couldn't get the wheels down. We had to bail out. There, I still had that ripcord in my hand 3 days later.
Wow. Close call then.
This picture right here, on the Pulaski, early at the Pulaski, when they bombed the Pulaski oil fields, those two pilots led groups that the losses were almost 50% there. And then they got transferred to England, and they were on our base. Well, Eisenhower had caught up there and was giving them the, I think it was the Medal of Honor or something like that. And the celebration was on our base. That's about the extent of it.
All right. How old are you this year, Bob?
91. The bulk of the 8th Air Force was 18, 19-year-old kids, 20 years old. I was 19 when I was flying. Our commander would probably have been in. He'd probably be 25. We call him the old man.
Yeah.
It was just a bunch of kids.
Right. Anything else you want to say about your room?
Well, I think that I might mention one time, there's some flak right there. When the first time we ended up in a flak field, I was gawking all over looking at them flaks, and all at once I could feel the air hitting me, and that piece of flak was laying in my lap. I saved it.
Wow.
That's the last time I looked at it.
Huh.
I think that just about covers it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bob.
Yes. And his plane was shot down.
Could you start over, Bob? Dr. Oakes?
Dr. Oakes. He brought this old gentleman, and he says, I want you two to get together. Well, so we got to talking, and his plane had shot down, and it blew up. I remember the plane going down. Well, he ended up, he was free in the air, and he opened his parachute, and he landed. He was the only survivor in the plane, and two young German boys with pitchforks come out and captured him, and then he ended up in a prison war camp, and he finished the war in the camp. Well, that story got posted on the internet, and here are these German boys, they're in their 70s now, contacted him. They had captured him, and the woman, their sister, had got his parachute, and she had made some garments out of it, and she had a little piece of parachute left, and she sent it to him. Here, 70 years later, so that's quite an interesting story.
Yes, it is.
So that's what how the communication get out now.
You're right. It has changed the world for sure.
Medical school, his buddy that was in with him, this gentleman was his buddy's father, and Dr. Oakes had visited at his home, so that's how he happened to be acquainted with this old gentleman.
I see. Is there anything else around the district that you'd like to talk about this morning?
Well, I don't.
How about some of your woodwork?
Oh yeah, we can talk about that. Or here, let's go into where the buffalo is. I'll explain something about that buffalo.
All right.
I had some property in Florida, and my brother would come down and spend the winter with me. He fished all the time, and I knew my brother was correct. He did a lot of taxidermy work. He tanned hides and did some work. And one time I said to my brother, I says, Ken, what are you going to do with all them hides and heads and stuff you got? He said, that's a good question, Bob. I don't know. He says, I don't think my kids are interested in it. Well, we had just taken over this building, and I said, well, why don't you will it to the Heritage Group, and we'll keep it over there. He said, that's a good idea, I will. So I told Russ Robbins about it, and Ken come back before I did. I was still in Florida, and Ken wanted to get something out of my shop. And he was over there, and Russ met him, and Russ waltzed him over here and showed him this space here. And Ken went right and called him. He says, Bob, I don't want to wait till I die. I want to do it now. I said, well, that's good. As soon as I get there, I'll start making I made all the logs. I'll start the room. Well, I had the logs about half up, and I stepped back now. I says, my gosh, this room's way too big. We'll never fill it up. How wrong I was. And then here, I raised buffalo for 30 years. That buffalo bull right there was a 4-year-old bull when I butchered it, and I got 1,200 pounds of dressed meat off that animal.
It's a lot of meat.
But all this was most of the stuff is my brother's. I had a few things in here.
Now, I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get Ken down here. Do you remember any of the stories about anything in particular?
Well,
in his fur room?
I'll tell you, we might get some. I'm going to go, Ken's in a nursing home in Fremont. I'm going to be visiting with him today, this afternoon.
Okay.
I'll talk with him.
That would be great.
Well, now here's something. A lot of these were roadkills. Ken had a deal going that he lived up at Vanderbilt, right in the elk territory, and if an elk would get killed, the sheriff's department would call him, and he'd pick it up and have it processed. Well, he got a call. There was a big cow. It got killed out on 75, and he went to pick it up. And when he got it, he could see it was really just about ready to have a calf. Well, when he took it to the processor, when he opened it up, so Ken took that sack and he cut it open and took the calf out of it, and he had this is an unborn elk calf.
Wow, and it's got spots just like a deer.
Yes. This is an unborn elk calf. So when I had the logs about half high, and I was working on that, and then I had a heart attack, so that slowed me down. I had bypass, and then my brother got in here and finished the room off.
It looks like he had quite a sense of humor with his taxidermy as well.
Yeah. He always these here's I don't know if we can here. I think it's over here. No. Oh, yeah. Can we get to that? Yeah. Has that got some pictures of buffalo calving?
Yes, it does.
Okay, I'll talk about that.
Okay. Let me move it out here, Bob. I'll move the rocker.
When these pictures here, when a buffalo calves, they don't lay down, they stand up, and they drop the calf, and then they turn right around, and they start. The first time I witnessed that, I thought that cow's going to kill that calf. They keep rolling that calf, and they keep poking it with their nose until they get it on their feet. And then once they get it on the feet, the calf nurses, and but it was just the buffalo was an open, herding, roving animal. They had to have those calves on their feet, walking, or the herd would leave them. So 2 hours after that calf is born, you couldn't even catch it. It's up running. So these pictures kind of show how they calf.
Right. Very interesting.
I raised buffalo for 30 years.
Okay, let me get this put back over here. Who built these benches, Bob?
My brother Ken built them. And I had those pictures in an album, and he took the pictures, and a friend of his up at Vanderbilt laminated them into them. I don't believe there's anything else we need to talk about here.
Okay. Shall we go look at your bowls?
Yeah, let's go look at here. We can get in through, open this door here, and we'll.
All right.
Oh, here, we can start by them right there.
Okay.
That I was going to make bowls out of those bowls. I was going to make all the woods of Michigan, and that's only half of them, right? There's about 60 bowls on here, but that's all the woods of Michigan. They're all labeled. And that's the woods that's in Michigan.
So each bowl was made out of one particular type of wood.
Yeah, and they're labeled. That log cabin right there
Yeah.
was about 5 miles north of White Cloud. My father was born in that cabin.
I see. In 1901, they were building the barn.
Yeah, later they built that barn, and the one that is circle, the young man circle, that's my dad. They never used that barn. After they built it, the family was getting growing, and they built the barn and never used it.
Wow. I think there's some more bowls down here, Bob, in a cabinet.
Yeah, that's the case.
In a case?
Those bowls, that case full, they're the same bowls as on the Lazy Susie.
Okay. Very interesting.
Now we can go to the other. I got some things I want to tell you about them other bowls.
Okay. I'll get around there and turn on some lights.
Yeah. These bowls, I made a lot of these bowls. I can make them. I make them boards both from a flat board, just like that. No lathe or saw touch them. And then after I make the bowls, I think some of them.
Here, I'll slide the cabinet down. Well, that one doesn't have it.
Find one that's got a penny in it. The ones I got. Okay, after I make the bowl, it has this hole in it, and it's got to be plugged. So when I was in Florida, the president of the bank rented a trailer from me, and he lived there, and he would get me pennies of the year they come up. That penny is dated, and that's the year that bowl was made. There's a date on it.
And this one happens to say 2001.
That's when I made that bowl. That was about the last I could make of them.
Uh-huh.
So, most of these bowls have pennies in them.
Very unique.
I think that about does it.
Alrighty.
I can make all different shapes of bowls.
And they all started from a flat piece of board, you say?
All from a flat piece of board.
Like this one up here.
Yes.
Very neat. Okay, we're here again with Bob Mudget, and we're going to talk about this mural on the wall. And Bob's going to tell us the story about this mural. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, this was, I got him a plywood, and this is the first that this mural that this fellow ever painted. A fellow by the name Ben Phelps painted it. And he worked on it all winter. He'd keep adding things to it, and he painted it. And then he decided he was going to put these Indian ladies down there doing their washing. And the women said, "You can't put naked ladies in there." And but he went ahead and did it anyway, and they all agreed it wasn't too bad after he put it in. But everybody commented on it, and he only worked a little bit in the morning on it, and he had it set up. But he got this whole thing painted.
And he did all of that in Florida?
Yes, he did it in Florida, and then he had a trailer down there, and see, it's in 3 parts, and he put it under his bed and brought it up here, and then he brought it here, and I put the trim around it, and he helped me get it together.
Very nice. It adds a lot to the welcome room here.
Yes.
And then you have a canvas painting on the other wall. What is
yes,
this?
My daughter installed that.
I see. Okay. Anything else you want to say about it?
That's it.
All right. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you.
Good morning. We're with Ken Mudget here this morning. We're in the Mudget Fur Room, and Ken has come to talk to us today about his fur room, and it's September 10th, 2013.
Few people realize that the state of Michigan, we have the largest variety of fur-bearing animals of any state or province in North or South America.
Right.
And we have, there's right at 100, about 110 different varieties of fur-bearing animals, and we have most of them right here. And the reason for that is it goes all the way back to the fact that Michigan is almost entirely surrounded with fresh water. Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Erie. And because of that, we have the largest variety of nut and fruit-bearing trees that provide ideal habitat for all this big variety of animals. And that's why we have all them here in Michigan. And we're so fortunate to, right here, all of these animals, there's many that you might wonder where in the world they ever came from. Some of them are the endangered species that are protected. You can't shoot them. You'd be surprised how many of these animals, these mounts here, are roadkills.
Really?
Some of them right close to Hart here. Besides that, some of the historical stuff, I'm 95 years old. My wife is 91, and they're not all animals. Right here, for example, my wife, when she was 5 years old at Christmas time, she got a beautiful baby doll in a doll buggy. And the doll is long gone. It got lost in a fire that we had. But this is her doll buggy that she got. So that would be almost 90 years ago.
Wow.
87 years ago, this doll buggy. So there's a lot of history. Okay? After I retired, I was quality control manager for a Teledyne company, Continental Motors, for 42 years. I started in 1939. I retired in 1981. And after I retired, I hunted a lot all over North America here, and a lot of these trophies are one that I got hunting all over the country. And I had trophies stored in my basement, in the basement of the church up home at the senior centers. And one day, my brother Bob, he said, "What in the world are you going to do with all those trophies when you're gone?" I said, "Well, I have no idea." He said, "Well, what if I built a cabin over in the historic district and you put all your trophies in that cabin?" And so that's how the whole thing started. Brother Bob, with a lot of volunteer help, built this beautiful cabin here with a total of 4 rooms. The first room he built was this one right here, and after he built it, he said, "My gosh, this room is so big, we'll never have enough stuff to fill this room up." And he couldn't have been more wrong, because in no time at all we had to add the second room and then the third room. And so there's a lot of memories here.
Right. Let me get this rocking chair out of the way.
When we go around, we find some very unusual things. For example, here is a fur that very few people have ever seen. When you first look at it, ask people what that is, right away they'll say that's a fawn deer. And over here is fawn deer. There, I'll tell you what this is. Up where I lived up at Gaylord, we had a program called the Venison for the Needy program. And we got all the roadkill deer, elk, and my job I was president of the club that we organized, the Elkland Seniors Conservation Club. We got all of those, the DNR, the Sheriff's Department, and the State Police. They would always call me. I had a winch on the back of my pickup truck, and I would go out and pick up these animals. And they called me at 2 o'clock one morning. They said a big elk had been killed out on I-75 for me to go out and pick it up. And my wife and I went out there, and when we picked it up, we saw that it was a female, a cow, real big, about to have a calf. We brought it into the processors. When he cut it open and started to work on it, this calf fully developed, still in the sack, and he gave me that. I took it outside and cut it open and washed it off. The more I looked at it, I said, I'm going to skin that out and have it tanned. And that's what this is. This is the pelt of an unborn elk calf, something that's very unusual.
Yes. That I never realized they had spots like a white-tailed deer.
Yeah. Over here is a little buck deer, what they call a piebald. That's a buck deer. It's not albino. Albino deer has pink eyes and they're all white, but if they got this, they call them a piebald. I killed that deer. I shot that deer up home in the month of December, right after the regular deer season. They had a special deer season for property owners where they could go out and kill a buck. I was back in my deer blind, and here come this little white deer. The snow was about 10 inches, 12 inches deep, and two coyotes were right on its tail, and they had it cornered. So I shot the deer. I knew if I didn't, that the coyotes would, and I got one of the, I shot the deer and I got one of the coyotes. And after I had that mounted, the picture of me holding that came out in the paper, and all kinds of people called. Why in the world did that old man shoot that beautiful little white deer? Why didn't he let it grow up? And because they didn't know the story.
Right.
These are just some of the unusual mounts. I'm not a taxidermist, and all of my bigger animals, I have the taxidermists mount them, but the small animals and birds, I do myself, like these partridge, that snowshoe rabbit. I do the small animals. When I say we got the largest variety of fur-bearing animals, here's an example. A weasel, a full-grown weasel weighs less than 1 pound, about 14 ounces. That's one of our smallest fur-bearing animals, all the way up to a bull moose, which weighs 1,500 pounds. And we've got everything in between, and we have most of them here.
It's good to see you had such a sense of humor with making them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a
Oh, the politician
small
showed up.
bear.
There's a politician. How are you, Ken?
Good
One
morning,
holding the
Stan.
camera. How are you?
Good, good.
Good.
Hanging in there.
Hey, that's part of it. Yeah.
How you doing?
Doing well. Doing
Good.
well. Hanging in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good.
Keeping Don here on
Oh,
the stove. Yeah. Keeping him on the stove. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I was gonna look for a wheelchair, huh?
All of these animals, of course, are not from Michigan. Here's a good example.
Yeah, but is Russ at it?
I don't know. Russ is coming down.
He's coming down?
Now here is an average sized wolf, and right here is an average sized coyote. And the wolves are pack animals. They run in packs, all the way from 8 to 14 wolves will be in one pack. Where the coyotes are not, they're loners. You might see as many as 3 coyotes together, but it would be a family, the male and female and the young ones. Now here is something very unusual. It's called a brush wolf. The wolf pack, when they're running, if there's any females in there in heat, if a male coyote gets anywhere near that wolf pack, he's dead. They'll kill him every time. Once in a great while, a female wolf will stray far enough out from the pack that a male coyote will nail her. And when those pups are born, they're called brush wolves. The sad part of it is that they're nomads. They can't go back into the wolf pack and they can't go to the coyote. For that reason, she usually kills her 2 cubs so that she can go back into the wolf pack. But once in a great while, she'll raise them on her own, and when they get big, and they're called brush wolves. Something that's very unusual.
Very neat.
We have all of these called the canine family. Then we have the fox family. And over here, we have the weasel family. The fox family these are all fox from Michigan. There's only 2 native foxes in Michigan. That's the red fox and the gray fox. Back in the late 40s and 50s, there was many fox farms all over Michigan here, and they would crossbreed their fox till they would get a lighter strain so that they make fur coats, and they would get a big price for them. In 1960, all at once the DuPonts developed synthetic fur, synthetic fox fur that was far superior in duration and appearance, and the bottom dropped right out of the market. For that reason, most all of these fox farms, all they did was open their doors and let those foxes out into the wild. And for that reason, we now have all these different colored foxes out in the wild. They're actually crossbreeds from the red and the gray fox. Yeah, there's a lot of memories there.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We'll go in the other room next too,
Okay,
after I rest a little bit.
sure. No rush.
Yeah,
We've got all day.
yeah.
There we go. So where is it you're living now, Ken?
Yeah.
Oh, where do you live now?
What?
You live south of Hart here now?
South of Hart, yeah, at Hesperia.
Okay,
Hesperia, that's where my daughter Karen lives.
nice. Okay,
I don't live with them. I live alone in the
Okay.
house there.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a nice woodworking shop where I build birdhouses and stuff for
Very
the
nice.
kids.
Very nice.
Yeah.
We have a lot of stuff that you made that people look at
Oh yeah.
still here.
Yeah.
We're not going to sell too many more of them because
Yeah. And when we get down there, that knife collection, I used to make them.
right?
Yeah. I was just thinking this collection here. Here's one animal we don't have in Michigan. I'm gonna take my sweater off.
Alrighty.
Too warm in here. The wolverine. That's one animal we have never had in Michigan. Never had a wolverine. Why in the world is Michigan called the Wolverine State? A lot of people wonder about that because there's never been a wolverine in Michigan. But the story goes, and this is right in the history book, that way back in the early 1800s, 1830, Michigan and Ohio was about to reach statehood. But they couldn't agree where the southern boundary of Michigan would be. Ohio wanted what is now our Upper Peninsula as North Ohio, and in South Ohio was where it is now, only the boundary would be clear down by Toledo. But, and they couldn't agree with that, so the federal government called a meeting in Toledo, and all the people from Michigan and from Ohio were supposed to sit down and establish those boundary lines. The meeting ended up in a feud, and for 2 days and for 2 nights they fought in the streets. Finally, the federal government come in and said, well, that's it. We'll establish those lines. And they did. They said, we want you to all shake hands. The people from Ohio, they shook hands with the guys from Michigan, and they said, hey, you guys fought fair. You didn't use guns or knives. You fought with your hands and your teeth. You fought just like wolverines. Right then and they said, we want to be called the Wolverine State.
I've never heard that
I
story.
don't know if that's a true story or not, but it's right in the history book.
Yes. Ah. That's great.
Well, let's take a walk and there's a lot of very unusual animals in here too, and most of them, my wife, she's 91 years old, and she's hunted all her life too. She's probably a better shot than I was. And she went with me on, after I retired, on a lot of these hunting trips, but quite often she had to stay home and help take care of the great grandkids. But here, for example, that cougar, the cougar is on the endangered list. That cougar was killed out in Nevada. And we have a friend that's a rancher out in Nevada. And if a cougar, which they call mountain lion, is killing their livestock, they can get a permit to kill 1 or 2 cougars. And so our friend called me, and he had a permit to kill 2 cougars. And if he wanted to know if we wanted to come out and help him. So we went out there, and he staked out a calf, and we rigged up a blind with these big bales of hay, a makeshift blind, and it was a perfect full moonlit night. And I sitting in that blind with my rifle with a 9-power scope on it, and sat there. The weather was nice. I went sound asleep, and all at once I heard this calf blatting, and I looked. I was probably maybe 50 yards from it, and this cougar had that calf down already. And that bright moonlight, I could see it real good, and so I shot that cougar. And there was a mountain of paperwork I had to get done in order to bring that cougar back here to Michigan. I had it skinned out. And also the deer, it's a mule deer. It's what they call a 5x5. We would call it a 10-point mule deer. We shot that out there the same day.
I see.
So that's what that mount is. The smaller animals, right down there is something very unusual. That's a raccoon, an albino raccoon.
Very neat.
And that's a roadkill.
It looks a lot like a fox.
Yeah.
The body does.
But it's a raccoon. They have a face a little bit like a fox, but it's an albino raccoon.
You can see the rings in the tail.
Yeah. Here's quite unusual too. That's a fisher from Michigan here, and there's very few of them. They're on the endangered list. That one was shot by a poacher, and the DNR caught him. They confiscated the animal, and the DNR knows all about this cabin, and when they get something like that, they usually call me to see if I want it. And there again, there's a lot of paperwork involved. And the way it's set up, the animals that the DNR donate, if anything ever happens to this cabin, that they don't have these anymore, they go back to the DNR.
I see.
Badger, beaver, coyote, all Michigan animals.
What is this on the back wall there, Ken?
That fur is very unusual, and that's a Persian lamb. The Persian lamb, because it's called a lamb, most folks think it's this little animal, but the Persian lambs get up to 200 pounds. In fact, I got the furs out there. Traditionally, they're always shiny black, and that one come out almost albino, light colored like that, and that's how come I got that one. Some unusual birds. Up there is a red-shouldered hawk, and down here is a red-tailed hawk. Both Michigan animals are birds.
Uh-huh.
Partridge, barn owl. These two doll sheep, these are not my animals. These are the only two that were donated by the Slocum family. And they're their animals, so I don't know too much about them.
Okay.
Bobcat. Here's something quite unusual. This rattlesnake, a Masagi rattlesnake, that's from Michigan. It's I'm going to sit down.
Oh, alrighty.
It's the only rattlesnake we have in Michigan, and that particular one, I've got a cabin up north there, up at Vanderbilt, and we were clearing the spot for that cabin, and there was an old rotten stump there, and we started to pull that rotten stump out of the ground, and there was that rattlesnake. And so we killed that and had it mounted.
It almost looks like it has an actual rattle on the tail, too.
The Masagi rattlers were at one time quite plentiful here in Michigan, but now there's very few of them. There's still a few around, but they're not, you get bit with one and it's not fatal like a diamondback.
Sure.
You get sick, but it's not fatal. Up there is a Kodiak bear fur, but caribou. Out here in Michigan, I've killed deer and bear and elk, moose, but no caribou. And years ago, the caribou was quite plentiful in the Upper Peninsula. And then in the year of 1930, the last caribou was killed by a poacher. And now the DNR is making a deal with, in Canada, northwestern Ontario, and they're going to reintroduce the caribou to the Upper Peninsula. They're going to airlift 18 caribou from up there to the Upper Peninsula, and then they keep them in quarantine for 30 days, and then they release them. That's how the moose got started back again in the Upper Peninsula, and that's been about 30 years ago. And they airlifted. At that time, the DNR, we traded 200 wild turkeys to the Canadian government for 28 moose. And they airlifted those moose to the Upper Peninsula. And now, that was 30 years ago. And now they have almost 400 moose, about 380 moose, and they're talking about having limited moose season next year. So that's how the moose got started, and they're going to do the same thing now with the caribou. There's two types of caribou. The ones up in Alaska are, they migrate every year down to where they can graze. And then the other ones, they call the mountain caribou, they don't migrate. They browse all winter long, and one of the unusual things about that caribou, you see, he has fur all over his nose, where our deer and bear and elk, all of them, their nose is just skin, but those, they have fur all over their nose, and the reason for that is so they can graze down underneath the snow in the wintertime to get their food.
Okay.
Just one of the wonders of Mother Nature.
Good morning, Rick.
Good morning. How you doing, Ken? You all right?
Yeah.
We got some out there. I told you that my wife was always hunted, and we always we hunt right on our own property up there at Vanderbilt. We got 160 acres, and we hunt every day of the deer season. Always get our deer, but she holds the record of the biggest deer, the biggest rat, and it's out here.
Okay. You want to talk about your knives and stuff here?
That's a hobby I started because I making these knives. A lot of them got deer horn handles. A lot of them got wooden, laminated wood handles. But I made them and made hunting knives for all of my grandkids and great-grandkids. They all got grandpa's hunting knives. And I made those up and put them on display here. I use bear teeth.
It's all bare teeth around that plaque?
Yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah, here, yeah.
That's nice. Nice artwork in there too.
Yeah. I don't know if you've been in here or not.
I have.
That's one of my most unusual mounts. This red fox fishing,
He's in a shanty.
pulling a crappie out of the hole, and it's so big it broke his pole. Kind of an unusual mount.
Very nice.
I did the whole thing, all except mounting the fox. The taxidermist did that.
Okay.
How you do, Johnny? Come on. These, the wild boar, we got several.
There's one over there, Ken.
Yeah, there, and there, and we got a couple in here. I got all of them down in Florida. Down where my brother Bob's place was, just a short ways from there. At Lake Okeechobee, there's a ranch where you can go and shoot these wild boars. And I went one time, and it was quite expensive. So I found out that right close to this ranch there was some orange groves. I talked to the owner, and I'd go and sit in these orange groves, and about 10 o'clock in the morning, those wild boars would come up out of the swamp to eat the oranges that had fell on the ground, and that's where I got most of these wild boars. Yeah, there's a lot of memories here.
Gave a story.
Here's one of my favorite things in here too, is these benches that I made up and put that clear lacquer over them. They last forever, but I got 5 generations of my family on there. And that my brother Bob had a place in Florida for years, and we used to go down there for 2 months in the winter time, and we were putting in a new dock, and we were putting the pilings down and the long post. All we do is, there's no rocks or stones or anything down there. We would just set them out there, and then we had a hose with a long nozzle, and they would gradually go down, you know. And we were just out a little ways and putting one of them down. It went down about 4 feet in the mud and stopped. We couldn't, just like it was on cement, you know, we couldn't figure it out. So we pulled it out and we started digging down there with a hook, and we brought that alligator skull piece by piece. We brought that out, it was buried down there in the mud. And we got a friend down there that's retired wildlife biologist, and he was telling us the story, these alligators will migrate after they're born. They're liable to migrate off 100 miles. But when they get up, usually between 80 and 90 years old, that's their lifespan. When they start getting ready to die, they always migrate back to the spot where they were born. Well, lots of times during that period, you've seen that the Walgreens, Walmart parking lot, there'll be an alligator right out in the parking lot. That's why he's trying to find his way back. He gets back to the spot where he was born, the same, he keeps wallowing down in the mud. He gets clear down in the mud there, and his heart stops and he dies.
Wow.
They always do that. And so that's the story with that alligator there. The wildlife biologist told us that was almost sure why it was down there. He came back to where he was born to die. That bear there, let's see, yeah, that one, and that small one back there, both of those bears we killed right on our own property. Yeah, up at Vanderbilt.
Okay. Yeah, my dad told me.
During deer season. Now they don't, the bear season is separate, but a few years back it used to run right along from November 15th to December 1st. Right during deer season you could shoot a bear. Oh, that one? Oh, they call it a rocky sheep. Rocky sheep. That's something very unusual. There is a antelope, female antelope with horns. I had an older brother that used to trap when he was young, and he trapped. And I know he always in the wintertime he trapped muskrats mostly.
Right.
And we had a one-room schoolhouse, and he had made a deal with the school teacher there that he would go real early to the schoolhouse and build a fire and fill they had a water tank. They had the inside bathroom, but they had a water tank, and he'd have to fill that and do all that, and then he would leave and go on his trap line, and he had right close to 100 traps, and he wouldn't get back to school until 10:30, 11 o'clock. But that's the deal that he had made with the school teacher. And another thing that he did with a trap line that long, you know, what you gonna do with all those muskrats? He would skin out the muskrat while he was going from one trap to another. He did it so long.
Right.
And back then, I think there was pretty good market for muskrats. I don't think he ever got any, I don't think he ever got, I don't know whether he ever got mink or anything else. Mostly muskrat.
Where was this one-room schoolhouse at?
What?
Where was the schoolhouse at?
Up at north, we were born and raised right over in White Cloud, and one-room schoolhouse was in Corwith Township, north of White Cloud,
Okay.
and that's where the old Mudget homestead, 160 acres, was right there.
Is the house still there?
Yeah, north of White Cloud.
Up 37?
In fact, if you look on the map, M37 going straight north of White Cloud for 3 miles, and then it turns left going towards Diamond Lake. Right where it turns left, right straight ahead there, on the map, you'll see Mudget Lake.
Okay.
And Mudget Lake was right on the, right on the homestead there, and Mudget Lake is actually the headwaters of the White River
Oh, okay.
that runs right through White Cloud there.
Is that about 5 mile or 7 mile crossed in there somewhere? Which mile road crosses there?
To White Cloud?
No, north of White Cloud, up by the lake. Is there a mile road?
Yeah. From, it's just small when it runs out of Mudget Lake there, but there's all those Penoyer Creek, Flinton Creek, and all those other feeder creeks that come in, and it's a good sized river by the time we get to White Cloud.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we used to fish that a lot. Back then, it was a good trout stream. But we got traps in here. Quite a few of my brother's old traps. And those hanging right there. I'm not sure, but I think it's these.
Rick Trommator, they had, and when they owned it, and they had like a general store there, they had 5 or 6 different things.
No, it's not these, but I got some hanging right here that's very rare. Right on the pan here, it says Hudson Bay Trading. They're Hudson Bay traps. They're someplace here, but I got a good number of them.
Here's
Here's that alligator's head. Something very unusual. That alligator, his whole body, his head and his whole body has a coat of armor. These here are right underneath the skin there.
Okay.
So it's just about, that's why they're so tough. I don't know how that got in there. I wanted to see if I can find one of these skulls. I don't. Oh, I might have one here. One of the unusual things. Well, this is a baby beaver, but the beaver, their main food is aspen bark, and they cut these trees, and for that reason, they're chewing wood all the time. Their teeth wear down real fast. But as fast as those teeth wear down, they never get any shorter.
They keep growing out.
There's how long that's just a... And the bottom... The bottom teeth is the same way. As fast as they wear down, they move right on out. That's just a baby, but look how long his teeth are.
That's amazing.
One of the wonders of Mother Nature.
Who's that in that picture up there?
Huh?
Who's that in that picture up there?
Yeah, that's my wife. That's how she dresses for Heritage Days. That picture was taken right here 2 or 3 years ago.
Seems like last time I saw her, she was dressed as an Indian.
Huh?
Seems like last time I saw her, she was dressed as an Indian.
Yeah.
Hey Ken, I want to talk to you about your pictures of the 2 deer and the fishing pole over here.
But my eyes are so bad, huh?
The two deer that you pulled out of the water?
Oh, yeah. One of our son-in-laws down in Ohio, they live out, it's about 10 miles out from Toledo, and they've got a pond on their place. And he worked in town, and she looked out, and this was during deer season, and there's 2 big bucks. One was a 12 point and the other a 15 point, and they were fighting on the other side, and she watched them. She kept watching them, and all at once she saw they were in the water, and they kept getting out deeper, and pretty soon they were completely out of sight. So she called Ted, her husband, and he came home, and he went out, and they got a boat on that pond, and he drug them up closer to shore. And they both, neither one of them had a hunting license. They both went in and bought a hunting license, and then they called the DNR, and the DNR came out and let them tag them up. But before they did that, he rigged up that fishpole like he was. But one is 12 point and the other one is 15 points. And their horns are locked right together, and he always promised me those horns. I was hoping to have them right here in the cabin, but I never got them.
What about this six-legged asparagus eater?
This, oh, yeah. I'm trying to think of that man. Is there a name on there, a man's name?
Mickey Quinn.
Yeah. Did you know him?
No.
Mickey Quinn is, he passed away 3 or 4 years ago, but Mickey Quinn, ask any of these guys, is a legend right here. He was a retired state trooper, but he was also a painter. And all of these signs, the big sign that says Heritage District, he painted all of them. And him and I really had a thing going about this. This is nothing but a cedar root, piece of wood that I made up like that.
Uh-huh.
And then over here, talking about Mickey Quinn, he had a great sense of humor. That's Mickey. That's Mickey and I.
No whiskey until I get the furs.
Yeah. He had a great sense of humor. That's that log cabin that's right up on the hill there. He was always here for Heritage Days. Mickey Quinn. But we used to, talking about those buffalo, years ago, when I first retired, I moved up right by Brother Bob's here. The Dr. Rudy Oaks owns that place now, out east of town. It's on the north branch of the Pentwater. And I had a boat for salmon fishing. I kept it I can't think of that town right close there. At the yacht club. We'd go out in Lake Michigan. But to decide whether to go fishing or not, whether the salmon would be hitting or not, we would always watch that herd of buffalo. He had about 14 or 15 buffalo. If the buffalo were all laying down, we wouldn't go fishing. If they were up grazing and feeding, real active, we'd go out and the fish would hit. And the other thing that he used to decide, he had a big fish aquarium in the house, and we'd watch if those goldfish were all just laying dormant. There's no use going fishing, but if they were feeding and real active, and the buffalo were up on their feet feeding, we'd go out. I don't know whether it really worked or not.
Well, yeah, the animals always know the weather that's coming in, and it depends on the weather to what the fish are doing.
The moose?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've killed, my wife got 2 moose up in Canada, but we went, I killed 10 moose in 11 years up there, northwestern Ontario, place called God Lake. And we used to go to to a camp there where we had a guide, and we would go up on the Algoma Railroad to a little town called Goodrow and get off there, and they'd pick us up, and it was 17 miles across to the Canadian Pacific Railroad. And this camp was right on that Canadian Pacific Railroad. And that's where we went. And finally, we quit going to that camp, but we would go up. We found that a trapper's shack that was abandoned there on the water on a lake about 2 miles up the railroad from where that camp was. So we started going up there, and we would take our own boat and put the boat right in the baggage car on the train, the Algoma, and you couldn't have any gasoline, not even in the gas tank on the boat, on the passenger train. So we'd call up there, and a gas company, we'd tell them the milepost where we were going to be. They would have a drum of gas with the spigots sitting right out there by the railroad track, right there where, and the train would stop. They would unload all of our stuff, you know, and we fixed up that shack. We took a big roll of plastic and covered the windows, and that's where we hunted for several years. There was 4 of us went up, but my wife went 2 or 3 times with us. The moose shed their antlers every other year, and we got up there the day before moose season one time, and we knew there was a marshy spot down by the lake where they quite often they would shed their antlers, you know. So we went down there, and we found this big moose antler, the one antler. And so that afternoon, we said, well, let's go down and see if we can't find the other one. And so we went down there, all 4 of us, and all at once one of the guys hollered, hey, I found it. And he came back up to the camp with that big moose antler, and lo and behold, they were almost exactly the same size, but they were both right hand, they weren't a pair. Yeah, we had a lot of experiences up there moose hunting.
You couldn't drive there. You had to take the train.
Huh?
You couldn't drive you couldn't drive your truck up there.
Yeah, and we hunted mostly on the water. Those moose, their favorite food is lily pad roots.
Okay.
And we would find one of these bays where there were a lot of lily pads, and if there was lily pad roots floating on the water, we knew that moose had been feeding there, so
Dug 'em up.
that's where we would stake out and wait.
Dad used to fly up to Elliott Lake. He used to take the airplane, land in Elliott Lake, and that's where they moose hunted,
Yeah,
up there in northern Ontario.
yeah,
But that train sounds like fun.
yeah, the pontoon plane out of Wawa.
Uh-huh.
So what do you have there, Ken?
Yeah, that's another one of my hobbies. But I see the pigs are missing. Oh, they're in here. Yeah, I made a lot of these cribbage boards out of pieces of moose horn and even some deer horns.
What is this made out of?
Oh, that's buckskin,
Okay.
and most buckskin you see is kind of tan colored, but that's dyed.
Okay.
When the leather is first tanned, it's always natural like this.
Okay.
Over by the post, is there a thing with 3 weasels on it?
Yep. Right here.
Yeah, bring that over.
Oh, they've got it screwed.
Or,
Screwed down.
It's screwed
It's
down,
fastened?
Ken. Yeah, it's fastened.
oh.
Oop.
Oh, yeah. See, the weasel, sometimes called a ferret, sometimes called a ermine, but they change color. In the summertime, they're brown like this, and then in the fall, they start getting that color. And in the winter, they're pure white except the tip of their tail. Oh, this is another one of my wife Azalea's donations. This was a planter out in our garden. She had flowers in there. And so I remodeled it, put a top on it.
Now you got the mother possum
Yeah.
giving the squirrels and ground squirrels. Chipmunks are right on the wagon.
Yeah. That's pretty unusual to see a possum that color, too.
Yeah.
That ain't too. I mounted that.
Okay.
Yeah, in all of these. Because they donated their planter. We used to have I got lots of fur hats. And we got a few fur coats, but when we had the Heritage Days, we used to have a lot of them, fur coats and fur hats. And when the kids came in, we would dress them up. We put a fur coat, a fur hat on them, and then we had a Polaroid camera. We'd take their picture, and I was always dressed in my skins.
Uh-huh.
And I was sitting in a chair, and we would have them dressed up in a fur coat and a fur hat, maybe one of them here, and then Azalea would take their picture, and we'd only have to wait a few minutes, you know, and then we would give them a picture to take home.
I bet you they had a lot of fun.
But, yeah, one reason we had to quit that, you know, there's no such thing as Polaroid film anymore. They took
Right.
that off the market. So we couldn't do that anymore. Well,
Anything else you want to talk about, Ken?
no, I'm sure wishing my wife Azalea, she's 91 and she's in a assisted living apartment up there now. So I sure wish she could have been here.
Yes.
She talked your arm off.
Yeah.
She loved to hunt,
Yeah.
and she was the best shot I ever saw.
Yeah.
She had to. When she was younger, I'd take the little pet milk cans and I'd set them on the fence post, and she would sit right down on the ground and with their little 22 rifle, no scope on it, just iron sight. She would sit down there perfectly relaxed, and she would sit bing, bing, and she would knock every one of them off those poles. I could never do it.
Yeah.
She's a good hunter.
Yeah.
Now, up where we lived, the little town of Vanderbilt, they have a buck pole, 1 day buck pole, the opening day, and several times, either her or I, and they have like 5 different categories: the biggest rack and the heaviest deer and all that, and several times we took our deer in the opening day and put it on the buck pole, but I always got a prize for being the oldest hunter. I never got a prize for the biggest deer or anything. It was always the oldest hunter. Yeah.
Used to hunt in the Upper Peninsula a lot.
Oh yeah.
Did you do all the birch bark?
What?
The birch bark lamp? The lamp, the birch bark lamp? Did you do that?
Oh yeah, I made that. Yeah.
That's really nice.
Long time ago.
Yeah, that's really nice. That
Yeah.
shade. Bearskin.
Oh, that's just synthetic.
Oh, is it? This one.
Oh, here's I was talking about that Persian lamb. This is Persian lamb right here.
Okay. Very unique fur.
And, yeah, and they're always shiny black like that. And doll sheep. See, these are all, this is domestic sheep. There's an alpine ram. That's out in the Rockies. There's a mountain goat. And here's a doll sheep. The unusual thing about that is the doll sheep, usually all the fur, that's a doll sheep, is like that. But once in a great while, a male will go up and they'll just have a strip of that fur down their back, and the rest of it is almost like deer skin.
Right.
Out in the Rockies.
All right, Ken. Do you want to talk about anything else before we call it
I-
quits?
I can't think of a thing. I think we've said it all.
Okay.
We've said enough.
All right. Well,
A
thank you
lot
very
of memories here.
Yes, there is. And I thank you for sharing them with us.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm going to see if I can talk my daughter into taking me out for lunch.
I think we can do that.
Down at Bob's place down in Florida, he had 4 or 5 rental units that he rented out. And a guy from Michigan, Jerry Felt, rented one of them, and they lived over by Traverse City. And one day, Bob said, "Hey, we knew that he was a painter. He liked to paint. And he said, I'd like to have you paint a mural for the Mudget cabin." And he said, "Well, I can't, anything that big, I don't know how we'd get it up there." So they went and bought this special plywood, 3 pieces, and he set it up out on their porch, there, that place he was renting. And every afternoon he would go and he would paint a little. And every morning, all of us would go over and he'd inspect it and pick it to pieces, you know. And he wanted us to do that. And he had these, my eyes are so bad, these Indian women doing some washing clothes
Yes?
in the water. Yeah, he had them, and they were bare naked, didn't have any clothes on. And his wife says, "You're not taking that up to Michigan like that. You got to put some clothes on those." So that's why he did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys.